We'd love to open up in a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, we thank you, we praise you, we give you all the glory this night for the gift of being created in your image, for being a part of your wondrous design, Lord. We beg for hearts and minds that are open tonight, ready to receive all the gifts that you want to give us. Just to ponder our own dignity as your beloved sons and daughters, to be aware of the brokenness, the noise of our culture and of our world, and the opportunity that you hold out to each of us every day to be apostles, to transform that culture from the inside out. Blessed Mother Mary, we consecrate this night to your Immaculate Heart, and we beg for your prayers as we say, Amen.
Grace, blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Tonight is very much about beauty. I don't know how many of you are artists and creatives, and you just are already kind of flexing internally. You're so pumped about tonight. And then there's some of you who are like, I don't have a single creative atom in my being, right? But you're probably, like most Americans at the moment, even passively listening to 8 hours of music a day. That's the average. About an hour and a half spent on Netflix every day, okay? Most of us are surrounded by either beauty in all of its authenticity, in all of its depth, or in many cases in our culture right now, her counterfeits. So I hope that this is a night that can really sink deep into your heart and have some practical application no matter who you are or where you find yourself coming from. As the evening unfolds, yes, I'll be breaking open this idea of beauty, but I'm going to be passing around an iPad. If at any point it comes near you, if you just keep it moving, it's your opportunity to get a bunch of free music that you can't actually get anywhere else. One of the good things that we do as a part of Love Good is host house concerts all over the country. In fact, it was in the summer of 2013, we did a 45-city house concert tour in 60 days. I would not recommend that to anybody, okay? We went as far west as Los Angeles, as far north as Boston, and as far south as Tampa, and everywhere in between. It was exhausting, but it was what really got this movement off the ground. I would fly in a different artist every week, and I had a couple of college interns, and we just hit the road, and it was amazing. One of the things that came out of that is this community, truly a community of artists and a movement of patrons who believe in the power of beauty to change the world. So we put out a lot of exclusive content that you can't find on Spotify, that you can't find on YouTube and other typical channels. So if you're interested in staying in touch and getting any of that content, this will be going around all night. It's just your first name, your email address, your social security number, it's fine. So let's have that moving around. And the artist who's really featured on this particular mixtape, this live album from several of our house concert events, is this guy named Scott Mulvihill. He's been on tour for the last year with Lauren Daigle, if you know who that is. He's a super solid Catholic that the world is only just now discovering. He's also the upright bass player on Matt Moore's Christmas tour right now. So he's just one of a kind and a really good example of the kind of artist that we rally around and that you'll be exposed to by signing up. Okay, so, beauty. Beauty, the last standing transcendental of our times, I often call it. Before I explain what that means, I just want to share a brief story. 4 years ago, I hopped on a plane from Nashville, going to Los Angeles, and eventually Tahiti, and ultimately to Auckland, New Zealand. I had never been on an adventure quite like this before. I had been to Sydney, Australia for World Youth Day, but with like 50 friends. You know, I had traveled to Europe as a study abroad student. I had done missionary work in Honduras, but as a parish. Never before had I hopped on a flight and an itinerary that was going to take me over 24 hours to complete, all by myself, not only to a country, but essentially to a hemisphere that I hardly knew. When I got picked up in Auckland, New Zealand, by a farmer whose name was Sam, I really couldn't help but wonder what the Lord was doing. But it began when I looked out my window as the sun was setting. If you can imagine a sunset from a plane outside your window as you're moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. You can probably already imagine how long it lasted. It was like a perpetual sunset. For the better part of an hour, hour and 15 minutes, I could just see the sun as we were soaring into the horizon. It was an epic start to this adventure. Halfway through dinner, I looked a few rows in front of me and I saw a Nashville Dominican sister, which is typically the quickest way to get me real giddy and feeling like mush in your hands. Like if you're a Nashville Dominican sister, Dunskies, all right? And so I just got really excited. And next thing you know, we're sort of exchanging book lists because it's a long flight, and that's what you do when you're around Dominicans. You exchange book lists. Remember that, okay? And actually, there's several books on that list that I have since read that have completely transformed my life. I love books, okay? So one of them is a biography of St. Bernard of Clairvaux. This guy, the youngest or close, he was like in the middle of 6 or 7 kids. All of them were beatified and canonized. His mom and his dad beatified and canonized, and quite literally saved Western civilization out of Clairvaux, France in about the 11th century. I would have never known the story of his life if not for that moment. So this is what awe and wonder does. It sort of makes us available to whatever the Lord wants to do. But Sam picked me up, and it was sort of evening time, and I didn't really know how epic the view was outside his back door. Remember, he's a farmer. And no, he's not a hobbit, but this is what he looks at every day when he wakes up. For those who don't know, the Hobbit trilogy and Lord of the Rings were all filmed in New Zealand, in no small part because it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I mean, we have so much beauty in America, but you kind of have to travel to get to it. Now, those of you who live in Phoenix and have been vacationing in Flag your entire life are spoiled, okay? Most of us have to get pretty far to find mountains or the beach or even cacti. Is that the plural form of cactus? It sounds like cactoxicin. Okay, great. So there's something remarkable about a country. It's got 2 islands, but some of the most concentrated beauty I've ever seen, ever. And so Farmer Sam was just sort of like my first stop. The next morning, as I look out this back window, I realize I'm going to be picked up by a seminarian. He's actually one of, now I think, only 11 seminarians in the entire country of New Zealand. There's 6 dynasties, 4 million people, 11 potentially future priests. Kind of an intense situation. And I expected him to be like a middle-aged fat man for some reason, which is a horrible stereotype. I went to seminary, all right? They were all young, way more athletic than I'll ever be, you know? But that was my idea of a Kiwi seminarian. So Isaac picks me up, ends up being completely like a jock. He's the youngest of 7 kids, grew up as a dairy farmer, like a total rock star. We became really close friends really fast, especially when he took me to what is now one of my favorite places on planet Earth, Hobbiton. Now, I don't know how many of you are sort of in that, 5'8", 5'9" range, okay? But that's where I find myself, 5'9" on a good day, okay? When I walked into those hobbit holes and suddenly everything was perfectly proportioned for a guy my size, I just felt at home. I'm telling you. It was an amazing experience. They perfectly preserved the film set as you would imagine it. At the very end of the tour, they take you inside the Prancing Pony, which just so happens to be the most frequented pub in all of New Zealand, naturally, okay? And even the doorways are all just circular, and they're exactly preserved from the movie. It was a pretty epic experience. And then a few days later, I found myself leading a life team at summer camp in Wellington, which is the southernmost city in the North Island. I've had the joy, the privilege of going back to New Zealand 3 more times since that epic adventure. I can assure you I never expected to go once, much less 4 times in almost less than 3 years. But the most recent trip was last January. To give you an idea of how ever so similar Kiwi teams are to American teams, this is them on the last day of camp, terrorizing me, right? Messy games, high ropes, low ropes, all the things you'd hope for in a summer camp, but conversion everywhere you turn. Not only is it one of the most beautiful countries in the world, it also, for some crazy reason, has the highest suicide rate of any country in the English-speaking world. I can't really explain that, but I know that they are hungry for God. And so when you show up in their lives and you love them better than anyone else has ever loved them, and then you proclaim to them the gospel, conversion is inevitable. And so through the last 3 or 4 years, I've been able to stand really close to these amazing moments in the lives of these young Kiwi teens. In fact, one of them is pictured here just top right of me. Her name is Grace. She's currently one of our apprentices, living, praying, and working in community out of Nashville. I could have never seen that coming when I first met her 4 years ago. But this is a group that wanted to take me out for live music the very last night that I was in town this past January. Now, I know live music. I come from Nashville. We have 200 live shows a night. There's more talent in the pinky finger of your waiter or waitress wherever you happen to be out to eat than there probably is in your entire being, right? We are surrounded by talent in live music. But they said, well, we want to show you what it's like in New Zealand to experience some free live shows. And so there happened to be a festival happening in the Botanical Gardens in Wellington. And within the first 5 minutes, when we discovered that the MC for the night was a cross-dresser, we thought the better is saying to its completion. It was kind of weird, definitely awkward. We took over the dance floor for about 10 minutes, and then we got out of there. And they said, Jimmy, we want to take you on an adventure. It's New Zealand. I've already been on like 1,000 adventures in this country. But this is something I had never done before. I said, Jimmy, we want to take you to Glowworm Mountain. I'm a Southern American boy. Like I'm used to like lightning bugs. Okay? So when they say glowworms, that's as far as my imagination could go. And so they began leading me down these paths just outside the Botanical Gardens, very dimly lit, eventually not lit at all. They said, Jimmy, you've got to be quiet. Do not pull out your phone. Let your eyes adjust. You need to stay in this darkness and this silence if the glowworms are going to come out. Again, awe and wonder rising up, but also quite a bit of fear and trepidation. These are a bunch of teenagers, a couple of young adults that I kind of trust, and I'm just waiting for them to walk me off a cliff into a lake, right? But sure enough, within 15 minutes of exploring these paths, one of the girls said, Jimmy, come here. She pointed down at a ravine, and it's just a lot of dirt initially. My eyes were continuing to adjust, and eventually I started to notice this flickering of lights all over that dirt ravine. And what I saw looked something like this. In that moment, it didn't really feel like my nose was in the dirt looking down. It felt a lot more like my entire gaze was fixed upward. Like I was looking at the heavens. Perhaps some of us have had incredible encounters with God looking up at the stars, standing atop a beautiful mountain. Maybe it's holding a newborn child in your arms or seeing an epic sunset. But all of these encounters with the beauty of God's creation are ultimately encounters with the beauty of the Creator, the author of all that is true and good and beautiful. The reason I'm so convinced in the power of beauty in these times is that we live in a culture of relativism. In a moment, we'll actually diagnose our culture as a culture of noise. It is so hard to encounter God when we are glued to our screens, when we're addicted to pornography, when we don't even know how to make a gift of ourselves in friendship, much less married love. These are confusing times. What does it mean to be human? Everyone's asking those questions. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What is my life all about? These are, of course, the perennial questions of college students, isn't it? Lord, what is your will? And looking up at the stars, encountering God in beauty is a wonderful reminder, first and foremost, that God is God and we aren't. The other two transcendentals that we often talk about are truth and goodness. It is very difficult to have a debate about truth in a culture of relativism. In fact, moral relativism has also taken goodness and sidelined it. But there is no enemy of beauty. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says, we don't want to merely just see beauty. We want, in fact, to be united with the beauty we see. to pass into it, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become a part of it. Ultimately, to become one with the author, who is, of course, God himself. So what I'm going to do right now, it's probably not what you're expecting. I mean, I can sing, but it really ain't worth listening to. I can carry a tune, and that is about it, okay? When you live in Nashville, you just learn your place in the world, right? But what I do really enjoy is writing film scores, typically for movies that do not exist. And if this was track one of salvation history, and we were imagining what it was like that moment when God started breathing the stars into existence, I think it would sound something like this. I wonder how many of us, even as a kid, maybe through middle school, high school, began to encounter beauty without connecting the dots to the Creator. That was certainly so much of my story until I was about 14 in the North Georgia mountains on a concrete floor, kneeling in adoration for the first time. It wasn't until then that I'd ever connected those dots, but the Book of Wisdom puts it like this. For all men were by nature foolish, who were in ignorance of God, and who from the good things seen did not succeed in knowing him who is, and from studying the works did not discern the artisan. But either fire or wind or the swift air or the circuit of the stars or the mighty water or the luminaries of heaven, the governors of the world, they considered gods. Now, if out of joy in their beauty they thought them gods, let them know how far more excellent is the Lord than these. For the original source of beauty fashioned them. Or if they were struck by their might and energy, let them from these things realize how much more powerful is He who made them. For from the greatness and the beauty of created things, their original author by analogy is seen. It's one thing to be young and to not connect those dots. It's a whole other thing to be growing up in our culture at this moment and not connect those dots. I'd say perhaps it's never been so difficult to encounter God. Yeah, especially in truth and in goodness, but even in beauty. And what is the enemy in the midst of this culture that seems to be more and more turning in on itself? And I think the enemy is noise. This is an image I came across recently. It's called the devolution of man. I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see statues erected to sort of capture what early 21st century man looked like. And it probably is something like this. I heard recently that the average American does enough scrolling on their phone every single year to cover the entire circumference of planet Earth. That's the distance that they scroll on their phone every single year on average. You should definitely double check that quote, because to this day I can't remember where I heard it. It was like 3 weeks ago, you know? But that's intense. If that's even half true, that is intense. I already shared some of the other stats. They're kind of frightening. Other ones to consider are Instagram. 95 million photos uploaded every single day on planet Earth. You know, Facebook, I know this is mostly our parents and grandparents getting on at this point, okay, but 500,000 accounts are still opening on Facebook every single day across the world. Twitter's a bit intense. 500 million tweets every single day. Never mind that most of them are coming out of the White House, you know? As I mentioned, YouTube is like 1 billion hours a day, and Netflix is 1 billion hours a week. We're behind our screens more than ever before. In fact, a lot of the tech VPs and founders, you know, the big companies like Google and Facebook, they don't send their kids to high-tech schools. They're realizing more the damaging effect it has on intellectual growth, certainly on psychological health. Here's a quote from a former VP at Facebook. She says, "I feel tremendous guilt. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works." They said the dopamine rush that you get checking your Instagram feed isn't that different from the same dopamine rush you get behind a slot machine. Taking it one step further, this little quote from Robert Cardinal Seurat. Many of you guys have read The Power of Silence Against the Dictatorship of Noise. 1, 2. It's a must-read. It completely transformed my life about 2 years ago. This is one of my favorite quotes by Cardinal Seurat. He says, "Our world no longer hears God because it is constantly speaking at a devastating speed and volume in order to say nothing. Modern civilization does not know how to be quiet. Most days, I don't know how to be quiet." I'm guessing that most of us can resonate with that. There's a battle being waged at any given moment for your soul and for mine. And I'm not saying that noise is the only enemy. I think it is one of the greatest by far. It's one of the ways that the devil just slips into our soul. In some cases, it seems harmless, but it can dispose us to virtue or to vice. The kind of music we listen to, the books we read, the shows that we watch. Over 70% of Netflix subscribers claim to binge watch on the regular. I've never woken up, but gotten to the end of 5 hours, you know, of Madam Secretary, or I've actually never had the courage to watch Designated Survivor, Kiefer Sutherland. What's the first thing that he was in back in the early 2000s that's addictive? 24. Like, I don't think I can handle that. I think I would literally not sleep for like the next year of my life. Even when I was a kid, I never like got up from an all-nighter playing video games feeling like a man. There's something in us that knows we're made for more, but these subtle, sly tricks, I think of the devil, and most especially we see this in media, has seeped their way into our soul. Now we can look at the psychological effects of noise and of digital addiction all day long, but I hope that the moral effects are increasingly obvious to you as they are to me. I read an incredible book about 2 years ago about the morality of music. It had nothing to do with lyrics, by the way. The morality of popular music. And this incredible Dominican, he assesses so much of mainstream music as either being something that disposes us to virtue or to vice. It makes it easier to find the good and choose it, or in fact more difficult. What that means is truly we've got to be discerning people, because the battle really does rage on. And that's what this next song is about. It's called The Battle. I actually first wrote it under very different circumstances that I'll share in a few moments. But it's a song about just the reality of struggle in every human heart, the constant temptation that we feel towards sin. In the words of St. Paul, we always are doing what we don't want to do and not doing what we want to do. The existential struggle is real, especially for the Christian, with a target on his back, because the devil, the last thing he wants is for us to become saints. So if you are in the battle for holiness, if you are battling for prayer, and grace and mercy are the realities winning out most days, this song is for you. It's called The Battle. Many of us have heard the great quote by Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian poet and novelist, "The beauty will save the world." Beauty will save the world. He wrote that in a book called The Idiot. Never read that book. I've hardly even read that passage, but I know that line. And I heard a whole talk on it once by Father Raniero Cantalamessa, the current preacher to the papal household. And he said, it is not the love of beauty that will save the world, but the beauty of love. This is where beauty begins to break open the human heart, regardless of how creative or artistic or even sensitive you think you are. Beauty, in a very real way, is the Christian way of life. It's the anticipation of heaven. In fact, one of the best definitions of heaven is just that word, glory. And glory is often simply understood as divine beauty. So that means every encounter with beauty is a foretaste of heaven. It's a way of pushing back against the noise. And so if noise is the enemy, I'm utterly convinced that beauty is the remedy. And so not only through music, but through my testimony tonight, I'd like to share a little bit of my own encounter with divine love down through the years. So, before I do that, see what happened? I wasn't ready for that. The last three popes have said a lot of amazing things about beauty. Pope Francis says that every expression of true beauty can thus be acknowledged as a path leading into an encounter with the Lord Jesus. St. John Paul II, this world in which we live needs beauty in order not to sink into despair. Beauty like truth brings joy to the human heart, unites generations, and enables them to be one in admiration. And finally, Pope Benedict XVI. To me, art and the saints are the greatest apologetics for our faith. He unpacks that further. He's talking about not just the beauty of music and art and architecture, but the beauty of holiness. That for him, who happens to be one of the greatest minds on planet Earth, it's the beauty of a holiness that most convinces him of the Christian faith over and over and over again. And so when I was 14 and in these North Georgia mountains, encountering the love of God in Eucharistic adoration, for the first time I realized that his love satisfied my heart in a way that nothing else ever had. This began a relationship of love that has been unfolding ever since. A few years ago, I found myself at Vanderbilt, there in Nashville, Tennessee. Most of my friends were either atheists or evangelicals. The atheists thought I was pretty crazy for having any sense of morality at all, but the evangelicals mostly thought I was going to hell because I was Catholic, right? And so I grew up in a very Catholic bubble and often found myself living a bit of a double life. And then in college, suddenly all of that was put to the test. And it was at a conference, as you can see, this isn't C. This is by no means a Catholic conference. Doesn't really sit with our sensibilities, does it? I would have made a really good Baptist, though, I mean, deep down. It's in me. I'm telling you, it's in me. Yeah. And this is a conference called Passion, and I went as a freshman in college with two of my best friends at the time. I'm probably like one of three Catholics in this arena with 12,000 on-fire evangelical Christians. And over the course of these 4 days, I realized for the first time in my entire life that it wasn't enough for Jesus to just be important, to just be a significant part of my life. He needed to be the centerpiece of my existence, the sum total of my heart's affection. This is also when sins against purity and chastity began to be conquered by God's grace like I had never thought possible before. I never stopped going to Mass on Sundays, but I began to develop a bit of a Baptist edge, for sure. And a year later, I convinced like 18 of my friends, none of whom were Catholic, well, maybe 2 of whom were Catholic, to go to this exact same conference. This time there was 18,000 people gathered in the arena there in Nashville, Tennessee. And guess what? Every night, I went home aching. Aching. At one point in a small group, this is going to sound crazy, but I remember praying, Lord, if you could just let there be some kind of mystical, Eucharistic communion, like this miracle could just like happen to me in this moment. I am so hungry for your presence. Like I've been hearing your gospel and your love and your word proclaimed so powerfully for 4 days. I want to be one with it. It's like C.S. Lewis talking about beauty. You can't just encounter it. You want to pass into it, to become one with it. It's why the liturgy of the Eucharist follows the liturgy of the Word. We should come to Jesus in the Eucharist hungry and thirsty. Always brave enough to say, Lord, give me more and more of who you are. And so I never went back to that conference again. Like 2 years later, I was at Seek in Grapevine, Texas, with maybe like 3,000 people, which was great. It wasn't 18,000 people in an arena. I thought, what's this focus thing all about? Lame, you know? It has since exploded. I think there's going to be about 18, probably not 18,000 at SLS in Phoenix. How many of you are going? Amazing. I'll be there as well. Come see us. We have a really fun partnership with the Beauty Initiative at SLS this year. But I imagine by the next Seek, it'll be 18,000 plus. You can't help but take a step back and wonder, what is the Lord doing in the lives and hearts of young Catholics and young Christians across the world? I see this. And I know in my own life this was a significant touch point. As I was studying abroad in London and finding myself lonely those days, and therefore going to daily Mass at this epic oratory. An oratory that Cardinal Newman, St. John Henry Newman, was very helpful in getting started soon after he got the one started in Birmingham. It was a pretty amazing journey of beauty where I had never heard sacred music before. I had never seen a church like this before. I pretty much just had this life-teen upbringing, kind of casually Catholic family, fairly average Catholic education, and then suddenly was surrounded by a lot of people very unlike me. And yet here is where I felt more at home than anywhere else in my entire study abroad experience, the Brompton Oratory. It was around the same time I began discerning God's will for my life, thinking about the priesthood, freaking out probably every other day of the week, trying to discern His will. And around this same time, my brother, who had been away from the church for quite some time, began calling me out of the blue. Just to give you an idea of how big of a punk my brother is, I'm the one on the bottom right. He's just pitched me, I'm sure of it, okay? Mom and Dad are Lewis, when I'm sick, you know. I'm the middle child, so I mostly flew under the radar screen growing up. I have a younger sister, she's now married with 2 kids and a third on the way. Really beautiful family, but kind of broken. You know, Mom and Dad had been divorced for about 11 years. Bobby was always antagonizing me, and it wasn't until he went off to college that we finally started getting along, because we just didn't have to see each other every day, you know? And a few years after that is when he starts calling me up out of the blue and asking all these incredible questions about the faith. You know, at this point, Instagram is barely a thing. So he's like, Jimmy, I see your posts on Facebook all the time. And you're always in some new place with all these really joyful-looking young people, and your happiness annoys me. Why do you love Jesus so much? Like, really, what is it all about? And it just began these conversations, because at that point he'd been away from the church for quite some time. He had been wrestling with alcohol and drugs and was living a fairly licentious lifestyle, to say the least. And so I was quite honored as the younger brother to be getting these phone calls. It was happening every other week, and before you know it, I'm in Atlanta visiting one weekend when Bobby calls me up, except this time sounding very upset on the other end of the line. And he proceeds to tell me that he's just woken up from a dream. A nightmare, he called it, where there were good spirits and evil spirits, not exactly language that Bob would have been using at the time. He said those evil spirits, they were suffocating me, all over me. It felt like the most painful thing I had ever experienced. He said towards the end of this dream, I was kind of losing all hope when suddenly there was this army of good spirits, and they began fighting off the evil ones one by one. I said, Jimmy, I saw your face and Mom's face and our sister Haley's face on the front lines of that army of good spirits. So when I woke up from the dream, really the nightmare, and y'all were with me, I began weeping uncontrollably. Moments later, the images of those evil spirits really kind of were haunting me, and I just started throwing up and also couldn't control it. And suddenly, like, my brother, after telling me this crazy story for like 20 minutes, looks up for the first time, makes eye contact with me. He says, Jimmy, it's almost like God gave me a glimpse into the state of my own soul. Which is exactly where that song, The Battle, came from. Hearing my brother's own self-revelation, which frankly is not that different from my own struggle, my own constant warring between good and evil. So desperately wanting to be a saint, but still hitting the snooze button most days of the week. So desperately wanting to be one with God, but also kind of having a hard time settling in to my holy hour most days because I'm so distracted or I'm so worried about other things. His father said tonight in his homily, what does it look like to find peace, that fruit of life in the Spirit and life with God. And I saw my brother tap into it that afternoon, because by the end of this conversation, he said, Jimmy, I think I'd really like to go to confession. I had sort of like soft pitched it a few different times, and by the last time it became his idea. It was perfect. And so I'm texting a close friend of mine. We're racing to our home parish just down the road, and sure enough, he walks into that confessional looking like he is carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he walks out about an hour later, looking like he's floating 3 inches off the ground. And we didn't have a fat and cactus slaughter that day, but we did have a steakhouse just down the road, so we celebrated. In a very real way, it was like the prodigal had come home. All of that was an encounter with the beauty of God's love, His saving love, His mercy. I saw it completely transform my brother's life. It further spurred me on in my own desire to help, especially young people, encounter that same love. It was less than a year later that my brother died in his sleep. And this tragedy rocked my family for months, as you can imagine. And there was a period of time there where I was very bitter and very angry at God, and feeling a bit just like unloved by my brother, as crazy as that sounds. And I was back in the North Georgia mountains in Eucharistic adoration, this time with about 300 young people from all over the country, again in a Life Teen summer camp. And I see these two young men at the front of the chapel, and the older one in a slightly audible voice says to the younger one, "I love you, brother," which were words I had never heard growing up, and in that moment meant a lot to me, because I was seeking a lot of healing that night. I was trying to surrender all that pain to God in prayer. And sure enough, about 20 minutes later, I see the same two guys. This time the older one has his hand on the shoulder of the younger one, clearly praying for him, interceding for him. And in that moment, I felt a hand on the back of my shoulder as well. I never turned around to see who it was, but something in me knew that God was at work. And a few days later, this super awkward chaperone from Texas walks up to me. Texas, right? How many of you from Texas? Okay, a few. Good, great. You guys love kind of yourselves, but mostly your state. It's just hard to keep up some days, And this guy walks up to me, like, actually super humble in this moment. He says, "Jimmy, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but I really believe the Lord asked me to put my hand on your shoulder a few nights ago in adoration. I don't know if you even noticed it, but that was me." And I said, "Oh yeah, no, I did notice it, and I didn't know it was you, and that's cool, great." He said, "But I need to tell you something. I really believe the Lord wants you to know that your brother is proud of you, that he loves you, and that from this point forward, I'm supposed to call you Jimbo." It's like a bit of a family nickname. I said, "Okay, bring it on, let's go." But in that moment, there was a rush of healing and forgiveness in the depths of my soul. There was suddenly a peace and a freedom that overcame me in a way that I hadn't tasted in maybe years at that point. And I suddenly felt closer to Bobby than I had ever felt to him during his entire earthly life. And with that healing came a calling, which was to go and be an older brother in the lives of young people that for whatever reason my brother could never be for me. And those have been my marching orders ever since. It's why I continue to travel planet Earth if it means grabbing one more young man by the shoulders or looking into the eyes of one more young woman and convincing you of the Father's love, convincing you of your dignity and your worth, His unique and unrepeatable plan for your life. But like any good young adult, I still have my moments, in particular my vocational crises. They happen about every 9 months, in fact. I think maybe I should go back to seminary. Maybe I'm supposed to be dating this girl. Maybe I'm supposed to be a monk. Maybe I'm supposed to start a religious order. That'd be sweet, right? I have been through it all, and I was having a real crisis while living a pilgrimage in Rome only a few years after this whole healing and calling moment. And I said, "Lord, this would be a great moment." Like, I'm actually walking in to the scavi beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where I'm going to see the bones of Peter with my bare eyes. I said, "Lord, this would be a great time for you to call me into something a bit more permanent than this wandering missionary lifestyle. Like, I'm grateful for it, I love it, but I'm getting a bit weary. I need a bit more stability and security in my life." And He said, "Be still." Right there in that moment of desperation, He said, "Be still. I have you right where I want you." And in a very particular way, I thought I heard Him say something along the lines of, I'm I'm not calling you back to seminary at this point. I am calling you to help young men discernment, though. Just something that had been in my mind, but not really something I'd ever heard from the Lord. And a few months later, back in the North Georgia mountains, obviously a common thread in my life, and I'm hanging out with, again, several hundred young people from all over the country, and the son of an NFL star walks up to me on day 2. I mean, I'm already intimidated, right? Like, he's the youngest of 6 kids. He's no more than 13 years old, and he's bigger than me, right? Okay? And he says, Jimmy, like, I'm loving camp. Like, this is always like a total surfer dude, clearly a jock. And in the first few moments of this conversation, I realized I'm going to have to step up my game to keep this guy won over, because he's way cooler than I am, way cooler than I'll ever be. And in this moment, it was very clear that Gavin was having the time of his life. As much for the whitewater rafting as for daily mass and adoration and confession and all of the above. And he says, Jimmy, there's just one thing I can't figure out. He goes, why aren't you a priest? Like, little did he know he was tapping into my deepest insecurity. Right? And I said, I don't know, Gavin, I don't. He says, because if you were a priest, I think I would try to commit a mortal sin at least once an hour just so I could go to confession with you. And I said, that's the most backhanded, roundabout compliment I've ever received in my entire life. It's so weird, dude. You're totally blissful cool. Let's get that rash in your brain a little further developed and then we'll have a conversation. So he walks up to me the next day. And he says, okay, I've been thinking about it now. I get why you're not a priest, Jimmy. It's because you're supposed to be my big brother. I said, what do you even know what you mean by that? You know? And it was so clear that he totally, in all of his purity and innocence, knew exactly what he meant by that, without having any clue what my story was about. Walks up to me the next day. Of course, at this point, I'm convinced he's a mystic, right? And he says, Jimmy, I've been praying about it now. I get it. You're not a priest because you're supposed to help guys like me consider it. Maybe make it not look quite so scary. And I took that to prayer for the next few months, and before I knew it, I was having this reunion of college-age guys at my house. We've been meeting as a discipleship group off and on for the last 10 years. Some of these guys I've known since they were in middle school. And sure enough, this was what we call Hawks Giving. HAWC stands for Honest, Accountable, Willing, and Chaste. Every Tuesday night. It's amazing. 12 to 15 high school and college-age guys on fire, wanting to be saints. And in this picture alone, there's 5 seminarians. In fact, over the course of the last 10 years, there's been 15 seminarians that you can all trace back to one of these groups where they were mentored and really lifted up by a big brother at some point while they were in middle school and high school. I can hardly claim responsibility for any of them, but there is a movement of brotherhood, discipleship, accountability, virtue, desire for holiness amongst young men and their dads in Nashville like I've never seen anywhere else. Enough to see the beauty of not only God's love, but God's plan for my life. See, beauty has a way of making us long for higher things, motivating us to pursue those higher things, which lead to our ultimate fulfillment. Beauty doesn't always have to make sense. The faith, in fact, is at its best and at its most beautiful when it's the mystery that it is, when we hold it up as the inexhaustible mystery that it is, which isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a reality to penetrate. But yet a reality that penetrates us, the love of God, the heart of God, speaking unto the heart of man, to borrow that great phrase from St. John Henry Newman, cor ad cor loquitur. The heart of God speaks unto the heart of man. The beauty of God's love constantly pulls us out of ourselves and leads us into not only that divine intimacy that we long for, but it leads us into apostolate and mission. It leads us into vocation. It leads us into the rest of our lives. Our rest of our lives as a foretaste truly of heaven. Ponder what some of that might mean in your own life as I play this final song. It's called Fountains of Love, very much written with the Holy Spirit and Pentecost in mind. And maybe even close your eyes, use this as a time of prayer, and beg the Holy Spirit to awaken in you the deepest desires, the deepest fire of who you are and what God is calling you to do with your life. First and foremost, to receive that love as a beloved son or daughter, to make sure that your doing comes out of your being. And then out of that deep sense of who the Father is and who he has called you as his own, comes calling, comes vocation, comes mission, comes the cultivation of gifts and talents, comes also all the brokenness and the struggles of life that God constantly consumes and conquers by his mercy. That's ultimately what this song is about. Again, it's called Fount of Love. Take just a quick moment to offer a few practical tips and even recommendations. The first are books about beauty, particularly if you like thinking deeply and philosophically. The first is by Emeritus Priest, Father Thomas Dubé. Second is Brand New by this professor at a seminary. And then the last is real short and sweet, and it's also really intense, by a German philosopher. The same guy who wrote Leisure, the Basis of Culture, wrote this collection of essays on art and contemplation. Also, Father, if you don't mind grabbing those stickers, and if you don't mind grabbing those, they're right in front of you. I would grab them, but just right there, yeah. And I actually totally ran out of podcast stickers, which is normally what I would bring, but because they arrived today, which is so unhelpful, because I left at 6 a.m., I have these YouTube stickers, so if you scan that QR code, you can easily find our YouTube channel, but also know that we've got a podcast. Every single Tuesday, I sit down with people like Matt Maher for Kenyan Country, Matt Fred, Leah Farrell, and we talk about these kinds of things, the role that beauty plays in one's own deepening of conversion, but also the evangelization of culture. So if you're a podcast person, check out the Love Good podcast with Jimmy Mitchell. It sounds kind of awkward to say. And or the YouTube channel is a great way to stay in touch. We're constantly putting out not only like excerpts of the podcast in video form, but also many talks, really epic videos of our house concerts and things of that nature. So check all of that out. Please stay in touch over social media. This is the part where I always feel ridiculous because we've just totally diagnosed our culture of noise, and I'm here saying join in on the noise, but there's also been incredible grace that has flown out of like little conversations over Instagram DM, or people asking for prayers when I'm in pilgrimage in Rome. Just don't hesitate to reach out. It'd be really fun to hear from you, to stay in touch far beyond this night. And then the thing that I would love to invite you to be a part of is what we call Love Good patronage. We've actually got like a good handful of Focus missionaries and college students now across the world who are subscribed as Love Good patrons because they're convinced also in this power that beauty has to evangelize culture. Now, I know you do not have like expendable income. You probably barely have food to eat most days, right? So we just started a $5 a month college and missionary friendly subscription level, particularly for those who don't want stuff as much as they want the content that you can't get anywhere else. So that's where you can find the full-length videos of all of our podcasts, full-length videos of a lot of different talks like this that are given not just by me, but by theologian, priests, and entrepreneurs all over Nashville. And then on top of that, we have a monthly live stream house concert that only our patrons have access to, password protected. It's super fun. So if you're interested, obviously sign up at $100 a month. I would love that. Right? But even at $5 a month, that's like, peppermint mocha. Whatever your taste is at a fancy, coffee shop, that's about what you get, with a cup of coffee. Once a month, we'll put the coffee aside, or go for 2 black coffees instead of something fancy and frou-frou, and become a Love Good patron. I would love to leave you with a lot of free stuff. And I go kind of crazy when people become patrons. But if you become a patron tonight, you not only get this beautiful t-shirt, which I'll show you in a minute, this epic novel by Andrew Peterson, who's one of my favorite singer-songwriters, but also novelists now out of Nashville. I would put his 4-volume saga called The Wingfeather Tales in the same category as Chronicles of Narnia. I know that's bold, but I'm going there. This guy's absolutely amazing. He's a modern-day C.S. Lewis. You get a magnet with our Love Good curating standard. If you want a CD of, you know what CDs are? We put them inside these machines. I don't know what to do with them anymore myself, but you get a couple of CDs, including my own, and then immediate access to all that digital content. I'll close with this. It's a quote from Pope Benedict XVI. And while I pull out this t-shirt, I'm just going to ask that you guys pass those around. Thank you so very much. But there's an arrow here and a heart. And Pope Benedict is quoting this really cool Byzantine theologian by the name of Nicholas Sibelius when he talks about beauty being an arrow that wounds the heart. Beauty as an arrow that wounds the heart, leaving you in a state of wonder to where you can't help but trace the arrow back to its source, who is, of course, God himself. So the most powerful way we can do that is with our lives. But in being a Love Good patron, not only do you get this exclusive patronage t-shirt, you get a lot of really cool, practical resources on how to curate, especially mainstream media, so that you're not settling for all of the cheesy or cliche counterparts or some of that, Christian media, which is good, but like not very artistic a lot of the time. And if you're looking for some like substance and depth and beauty, that's what we help you find and expose you to. So you also get this. By the way, you could like literally unsubscribe tomorrow and I wouldn't know. Because I don't look at that stuff. I have an assistant now. So I would be like hurt maybe eternally. Shoot. Not at all. I would just would love for you guys to walk out of here with a bunch of stuff so it's less for me to pack into a suitcase tomorrow night. But it's been a great privilege. To close in prayer. And I'm going to hang as long as anybody would like to tonight until Father Will picks me up and takes me on for a beer, I think. But until then, I'd really like to get to know you all and hear some of your stories, pray with you, and just be with you. And just revel in the beauty of God's love that is very much with us, and that will, in a very particular way, be with us at Christmas, which is so much what this season of preparation is about. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Father, we thank you so much for the gift of your love, for the beauty of your creation, the beauty of your church, especially sacraments. We thank you for the way that you weren't just Emmanuel 2,000 years ago as a baby in a manger, but you are Emmanuel now here in our hearts and especially in the sacramental life of the church. We beg, God, for a deeper awareness of your movements in our life, for a deep peace and trust and abandonment, and knowing that you have us right where you want us, to be still even in the midst of the storms of our life. And ultimately, Lord, to trust that you are our Father, that you're never going to stop loving us, that you're never going to give up on us, that you are for us and with us to the end. Blessed Mother Mary, we again ask that you would pray for us, be a mother to us, help us to prepare well in these next 3 weeks for the coming of the Christ child, just as you prepared over those 9 months of your holy pregnancy. Give us patient but hungry hearts. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.